The strange broken economics of Ireland. Okay. By the channel Polymatter. I don't really know much about Ireland, just that the accent is pretty hardcore. That the British used to not be very nice to Ireland. That's about it. And in Sons of Anarchy season 3, 4, they go to Ireland. I think that's all I know. Yeah. Voice command. Got home and very tired, so gonna be popping in and out. Fair enough. Have a good rest. Let's watch this. So, Polymatter, the strange broken economics of Ireland.
In 2015, the Irish economy grew by an unprecedented 25%.
Okay.
In just 12 short months, it achieved the previous 12 years' worth of growth.
What
Needless
did
to
they
say,
unlock?
that doesn't happen anywhere. The global average that year was 3.1%.
Fastest growth economic. India 8%, Rwanda, Malta, Kiribati, Ethiopia, Tuvalu, Turks and Caicos, Somalia. Somalia, really? Would it be because of the pirates?
Even China and India could only manage 7 and 8. And yet, 2015 wasn't the only time Ireland exceeded all possible expectations.
Really?
6 years later, its economy grew by nearly 14%.
Alright.
Today, Ireland is the second richest country in the world with a population over 1 million.
Okay.
Its per capita GDP of $104,000 is 36% higher than the United States. Even more impressive is how recent all this is.
Right.
30 years ago, Ireland lagged slightly behind the European average. Now, it's almost 3 times wealthier.
What is it? Like, I have no idea what Ireland produces, or what they have plenty of or anything. Alcohol, maybe?
In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, it received billions of euros in subsidies from the EU. Today, it contributes billions of euros.
Billions.
Back then, thousands fled the country in search of greener pastures. But since 1996, the flow of migration has reversed. Skilled professionals from around the globe now relocate to the island every year. For all these reasons, Ireland has been called the Celtic Tiger, in reference to the rapid rise of the 4 Asian tigers: Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore, and South Korea. There's just one tiny problem. It's not real.
What does that mean?
These numbers are all real, and these facts are technically true, but what they imply is not. The Irish economic miracle is an elaborate, carefully preserved illusion.
Okay.
To see why, we need to roll back the clock to 1980, the year everything changed. Sponsored by GiveWell, the independent nonprofit whose rigorous charity research allows you and I to make the largest possible impact.
Videos. Actually, they had commercials, so it's the same.
Apple became the first foreign tech company to manufacture in Ireland.
Apple.
According to CEO Tim Cook, it saw in the country, quote, a community rich with talent and one that could accommodate growth. And in the official corporate version of history, that's where the story ends. Apple took a chance on this small developing nation, and the two grew hand in hand. Apple's
it was probably much more about tax or something, right?
Press release for its 40th anniversary repeatedly refers to its Irish family and community. But the timing tells a different story. Ireland has pursued business-friendly policies since at least 1956, when it began offering 10 years of generous tax breaks to foreign manufacturers. But after joining what would become the European Union in 1973, it agreed to phase out those incentives starting in 1981. Apple, in other words, snuck in the door right at the 11th hour, securing for itself a full decade of tax breaks during the company's most vulnerable era. It was during this period that Steve Jobs was replaced by the former CEO of Pepsi, John Scully, who initiated a major restructuring.
That's random.
The company was losing billions of dollars, and bankruptcy was on the horizon. Ireland wasn't doing much better. nearly a quarter of its population was unemployed.
Damn, that's
So,
crazy.
as its 10-year window began to close, Apple approached the country with an offer. It would funnel nearly all of its worldwide revenue into Ireland, but it was only willing to pay an effective tax rate of less than 2%. And while 2% may not be much, that was 2% the country would otherwise never see. In return, Apple would have a safe place to stash its international profits. Ireland, desperate for whatever cash it could get its hands on, accepted this opening bid without negotiation. The only thing left to do was write the tax code. To make this arrangement legal, it worked backwards, crafting rules that would artificially produce the 2% figure. And just like that, Apple had set its own tax rate.
Classic.
Now, the reason this was possible was IRS Form 8832. Form 8832 doesn't look like much. It's a pretty unassuming 3 pages. But it completely transformed the American tax landscape.
Never heard of it.
Before 8832, US corporations were required to pay US taxes on their worldwide income, whether their bananas were sold in South Carolina or South Africa. Until recently, that rate was 35%. After 1996, US corporations could simply check a box, allowing them to avoid paying this tax as long as their money stayed overseas. A year later, Ireland passed a similar law.
I get so annoyed.
Now,
I get so annoyed anytime I hear anything about tax. Like, I've told the story, but like I used to not pay tax because I never won, enough to warrant it when I worked like an official normal job, right? But with this channel, I am self-employed or whatever. And even though I make literally like peanuts, even compared to what I was making before, right? I've had to pay tax because I am like self-employed or whatever. It's insane, right? Like, so anytime I see stuff like this of like, billions of millions of trillions of dollars company who try to like get away from paying like a little bit of tax, and my ass has to pay some tax, when I barely like win 0.0000000000000000000000000 like 1% of what they win or something, and you could probably add a bunch more zeros, and I'm here paying like some dumbass tax. I feel mad. All that to say, I feel mad. Yeah, I just wanted to complain. That's all.
now companies only had to pay tax in the country where their key decisions were made.
I just
In
paid my tax
practice,
recently.
anywhere they wanted.
So literally I have no
Or,
money right
even
now.
better,
why I'm
nowhere
mad.
at all. The trick was that no one was enforcing consistency. In America, Apple could argue its subsidiary was genuinely Irish. Over in Ireland, Apple could simultaneously argue it was really based somewhere else, like Bermuda.
Bullshit.
That was step 1. Apple had created a low-tax Irish subsidiary, but it still needed to move its international
Literally
profit
made a country there, bitch.
into that company.
At
When
what
you
point does a
walk
company
into
have too
an
much
Apple
power?
store in Munich and buy an iPhone, that profit needs to somehow end up in Apple Ireland, not Apple Germany. The solution was intellectual property. IP is the perfect vehicle for tax avoidance because it's A, extremely valuable. Who could argue that the Apple logo isn't worth a fortune? And yet B, extremely difficult to value. Who's to say it's worth 1 trillion and not 1.2? By moving around these priceless yet intangible patents, logos, and other trademarks, Apple could move its profit too. It simply gave the rights to use its IP outside of the Americas to its Irish subsidiary. Then, whenever it sold an iPhone in Munich for, say, $100, Apple Germany would have to pay Apple Ireland, let's say, $98 for use of its trademark. Thus, 98% of the profit would be attributed to low-tax Ireland. But there's a wrinkle. Officially, Ireland's corporate tax rate is 12.5%.
Officially.
Recall that to reduce this to less than 2%, Apple declared its Irish subsidiary a tax resident of somewhere like Bermuda, where the rate was even lower. Except Ireland imposes a special 20% tax on transfers to known tax havens, like Bermuda. Apple, therefore, needed to transfer its money through an intermediary,
God.
another company, this time in the Netherlands, to which the first Irish company would sublicense its IP. Next, Apple created a second...
All this makes me think is that we need some kind of... I mean, looking at the world right now and forever, it's be surprised for it to happen, right? But we need some kind of like worldwide, you know, entity composed of like, you know, like low people from like multiple nations that basically deals with this kind of bullshit. But at the same time, it wouldn't happen, right? Because some country are more than willing to you know, for example, get Apple to come into their country, even if they give them like some big privilege. So in the end, yeah, like the problem with like all these big companies is that there's no one to stop them from doing all this bullshit and getting away from paying what they need to pay, right? Yeah. And then, you know, again, the regular people who barely survive with peanuts, you know, there's no way to not pay what you have to pay. Like, you're just fucked. You have to pay what you have to pay. But those big ass companies with their trillions, yeah, like they always find some bullshit to not pay. Love it.
Irish company, which sub-licensed the IP from the Dutch one. Lastly, this second Irish company would license its IP to Apple subsidiaries across the globe. Now, all together. You walk into a German Apple store and buy an iPhone. Apple Germany argues that most of the value of that sale was derived from intellectual property it doesn't own. Therefore, Apple Germany pays a royalty to that second Irish company. The second Irish company also doesn't own anything. It too pays a fee to the Dutch company. The Dutch company does the same, forwarding most of the money it's just received onto the first Irish company. Finally, the first Irish company claims its key decisions are made in a small Caribbean country, where the corporate tax rate is at or near 0%.
I can appreciate
Voila.
the mindfuck that went to this.
Apple pioneered this strategy, which became known as the double Irish with a Dutch sandwich. But it was by no means the only corporation to take advantage. Google, Microsoft, and Facebook all did the same.
I figured.
During the 90s and early 2000s, US multinationals made an increasing share of their profits overseas, billions of dollars of which made their way to Ireland. And while most people assume some level of tax shenanigans, the astonishing scale of this effort largely flew under the radar for years. Much of what we know today is only thanks to independent researchers and academics like Emma Clancy, Brian O'Boyle, and Kieran Allen. Then, in 2013, as the public began taking notice, the US Senate held high-profile hearings, attended by Tim Cook. With the world's attention focused on Ireland, the country feigned innocence. Apple had simply exploited a loophole. Never mind that it had expressly written its tax code to produce these results.
Yeah, and obviously, you know, like a lot of country, you know, who get some benefit from it will be happy to have ignored it and then just claim they didn't know, right? But then the other country were actually getting fucked from, you know, not being able to collect tax. Yeah. I mean, yeah, this reminds me of like, you know, some stuff in France where like, yeah, like anytime like taxes is increased for like the truly rich, I'm talking about like the, you know, people with like millions and stuff like that, like they just move somewhere else. And then they just spend the time in vacancy in France. And it's just the most bullshit thing, right? That, you know, on one end, like they have the freedom to do it. It would be fucked up, you know, you are forced to stay here. But at the same time, if you win most of your money in France, and then you want to avoid paying tax by just moving somewhere else, but just being in vacancy in France or something, like, I don't know. I feel like most people, like most regular people, I get, you know, insanely angry about tax stuff, you know, like us, the normal people who can barely pay them, you know, constantly like going to the bullshit of them. And then everybody with the money, you know, they have the actual opportunity to just do everything they can to avoid paying it because they have money to pay to avoid paying. You know what I mean? It's just like one of those things that make me fume. I don't really get heated about too many things, but that gets me heated.
The double Irish was no more, it announced. Irish companies would now be taxed in, if you can believe it, Ireland.
Wow.
Apple's first Irish subsidiary could no longer claim to be a tax resident of, say, Bermuda. But not to worry. Generally speaking, tax treaties supersede local laws. Companies, therefore, could simply replace Bermuda with the country that shared a tax treaty with Ireland. For Apple, that country was Jersey, the British Crown dependency with a population of just over 100,000 people.
Never heard of Jersey.
Problem solved. Now, it should be clear by now that Ireland is, in fact, a
Clearly.
tax haven.
Yeah.
The question is its economic success real? Recall that Ireland is one of the richest countries on the planet, with a per capita GDP of over $100,000, and that its economy grew by 25% in 2015 alone. Critics of its tax regime argue that this is all just a statistical mirage, that the country is little more than a Bermuda, Bahamas, or British Virgin Islands with castles. Consider, for example, what happened in 2015. Irish workers weren't suddenly 25% more productive, nor did Irish companies export 25% more goods. No, what really happened is that when Ireland closed the double Irish loophole, it opened a new one.
Of course.
Starting in 2015, companies could subtract from their tax bill the full cost of any IP they purchased. So what did companies do? They bought a whole lot of IP. From themselves, of course. Companies like Apple transferred an estimated $270 billion worth of trademarks and patents into their Irish subsidiaries.
Okay.
And since on paper, trademarks are no different from oil or refrigerators, Ireland's GDP grew by 25%.
So then, yeah, okay, I see.
This is what skeptics mean when they say its economy isn't real.
So then the regular people is still, you know, like for a second I was thinking, you know, in the end, like, you know, it's kind of bullshit. It's bullshit in some way, right? But then if, you know, by doing all this, Ireland is actually improving the country, improving the life of its own people. Yeah, it's obviously fucking other country who won't get to see like the tax money, right? But if by accepting this deal with the devil Apple, they are helping their own people, I guess it's fine. But are they really? Like, this seems just the classic, the rich will get richer, like, you know, so yeah, who is this helping?
Even worse, while the benefits aren't real, they argue, there are real costs. The dominance of foreign multinationals in tiny Ireland has contributed to a housing crisis that makes America's look tame by comparison. Between 1991 and 2007, Dublin home prices increased by 429% according to these researchers. Secondly, the Irish economy is incredibly dependent on a very small number of American corporations. Just 10 are responsible for 60% of the country's corporate tax receipts. The top 3 pay about a third of the total. From the recent boom to the busts of the Great Recession and the dot-com bubble, the Irish economy is fully at the mercy of Washington. In 2021, Ireland was pressured into signing an OECD agreement that sets a 15% global minimum corporate tax rate and reallocates profits to the country in which a sale physically occurred. If the past is any indication, Ireland will simply invent a new loophole.
Of course.
Still, the risk remains that it will one day truly be forced to change its ways and lose out on this revenue. And not just revenue. As proponents of Ireland's tax regime are quick to point out, part of the implicit bargain struck nearly 40 years ago between Apple and Ireland was that the former provide high-quality, highly paid employment. The United States, along with much of the world, experienced a baby boom following the end of World War II. 20 years later, these millions of young adults joined the workforce, producing this steady 40-year rise in employment.
Fair enough, yeah.
Ireland's baby boom, on the other hand, was about 30 years delayed and much more compressed. As you can see, it suddenly had millions of young, working-age people in the 1990s. Apple and its peers put thousands of these 20 and 30-year-olds to work. Today, as much as 10% of the Irish workforce is employed by foreign companies, nearly all American and nearly all in tech. Apple's 2020 press release about its Irish community wasn't a total smokescreen. It truly does employ more than just accountants. Even if low taxes brought multinationals in the first place, this argument goes, they've stayed for its genuine operational advantages. Indeed, Ireland is now the only English-speaking country in the EU. It's a mere 6 hours from New York, and its population is highly educated. Sure, Ireland is the only English-speaking country in the EU.
Oh, once again, I was like, what the fuck is it saying? Does the British not exist anymore? But yeah, no, they left. That's right. That's right. Fair enough.
It's a mere 6 hours from New York, and its population is highly educated. Sure, Ireland is a tax haven, they might admit, but its economic success is very real. But what both those who argue Ireland's economy is real and those who argue it's fake misunderstand is that real and fake aren't contradictory. In fact, these two sides of its economy are complementary. Take, for instance, what happened in 2013. Shortly after the explosive US Senate hearings, the European Union launched an investigation into Apple's tax practices.
Nice.
And in 2016, it concluded that Ireland had granted it special treatment. And while it is, of course, entitled to set its own tax laws, as a member of the EU, it also agrees not to grant preferential treatment to any one corporation. The court, in a ruling that has since been overturned and is now in the process of a second appeal, ordered Apple to pay Ireland $14 billion in unpaid taxes. So how did Ireland react to this $14 billion windfall? With outrage. To the confusion of many Irish citizens, their government launched an immediate challenge to this ruling.
They don't want the money.
Now, you might be thinking, of course, better to turn down a small sum of money today to preserve the larger flow tomorrow.
Right.
But this was no small amount of money.
It's not, but again, like, losing Apple and a lot of the big companies that might literally be like, yeah, no, if you do this, we're moving. Losing that might be like too much for them, right? They really rely on it to survive, as you said earlier. So yeah, like the lump sum might be appealing, but
remember, Ireland is a country of just 5 million people. $14 billion would have paid for the country's entire annual health budget, or 7 years of transportation. Let's not forget that lower corporate tax rates are merely an alternative means of achieving the same goal. The Irish government, like every other government, is in the business of collecting more taxes. So why turn down so much cash? Especially since, in the eyes of Apple, Ireland's hands were clean. It didn't initiate the court case, the EU did. Because Ireland is not just a tax haven.
okay.
After all, there are safer, cheaper, and more secretive places to stash your profits. It isn't even the
Lowest corporate tax rate. Lithuania, Slovenia, Poland, damn, the Balkan though. Turkey, Latvia. Okay. Switzerland. Damn. Okay. Interesting.
jurisdiction in Europe. Apple could surely find a more accommodating government in a smaller, less democratic Caribbean island. What Ireland really sells, and what the Caribbean can't offer, is its untarnished reputation. Yes, the ultra-low taxes of the Cayman Islands, but without the connotation of the Cayman Islands.
Yeah, but that made sense until now. Now, for a decade, it's been obvious, well, it's been known now that it's also a tax haven, no?
Here's how it works. First, Ireland's real economy, the one in which real people go to work every day and fix pipes, connect servers, and sell computers, creates the illusion of legitimacy.
I get it.
Second, thanks to this illusion, companies concerned about their image, like Apple, choose Ireland as their tax shelter. Third, in doing so, Apple inflates the country's economic health, creating the appearance of unbelievable wealth. Fourth, and finally, this economic miracle is seized upon by those with an agenda to lower corporate tax rates, who argue, look what's possible when you're just friendly to businesses. Without the real, in other words, the fake wouldn't exist. And without the fake, neither would the real. In that 2013 Senate hearing, Tim Cook proudly proclaimed, quote, Apple does not hold money on a Caribbean island, and, quote, does not have a bank account in the Cayman Islands.
Man,
that was
the bullshit,
true,
the bullshit.
and that's why Apple chooses Ireland. The reason Ireland fought the EU ruling was that something more important than $14 billion was at stake. Something extraordinarily valuable, yet impossible to precisely value, much like the intellectual property Apple moves between its subsidiaries. Its reputation.
Interesting place.
In truth, many of the things we value the most are also the most difficult to measure. Happiness, love, creativity, and doing good. We all want to do the most good, but when we give to, say, a charity, how do we ensure that we're making the largest possible impact? Well, in 2007, a few friends had that same question and decided to start GiveWell. They closely scrutinize all the data we have on charities and publish this information on the GiveWell website, allowing you and I to compare some of the over 1.5 million nonprofit organizations in the United States. That way, when we go to donate, we know where our money is going, what it's doing, and who it's helping. These are non-partisan, cost-effective, evidence-backed causes like preventing malaria, solving vitamin deficiencies, and incentivizing childhood vaccines. We shouldn't have to become experts on charitable giving. When we shop for phones or cars, we search for reviews. So why not outsource that work to charity researchers? What I like about GiveWell is that they don't take any fees. All your money goes straight to the charity of your choice.
That's good, then.
They've even gone out of their way to advise me not to disparage other charities, which to me is a pretty clear indicator of their values. Plus, right now,
Okay, but there's a lot of like notoriously bad and terrible charities which probably deserve to be disparaged or whatever the word was. No? Maybe it's good to let people know about the bad one.
New donors can get their entire donation matched up to $100 before the end of the year as long as funds last. So hurry now while you still can and go to givewell.org, that's givewell.org, or click the link in the description or on screen now, then choose YouTube and enter Polymatter at checkout to do twice as much good.
I like this kind of sponsorship. That's a good one. I've never given to an online charity or anything. The only thing I've ever done is like, you know, when you go to the store sometime, like there's in France we have like Croix Rouge, for example, or les Restos du Cœur. They're like the two big organizations that help people in need or like homeless people. And so you go to the store, and when you enter, they give you like a bag if you want, and you fill it with food, like usually pasta and stuff like that, right? That's the only thing I've ever done. I never really given to like an online charity per se. Yeah, but you know, I guess that's already something, right? I myself, when we were young, we used to go to the Restos du Cœur because we were terrible financial situation, and I have good memories of it. Like, you know, one time I remember like you know, there was like someone serving like hot chocolate, and I remember like it was so tasty that I got 3 or something in a row, and everybody was super nice and everything. It was a good memory, yeah. Okay, anyway, as far as like the video, yeah, great video, very interesting. I mean, it's interesting like how it says that the whole point for them was choosing Ireland, in a way, is, you know, because of the reputation. But now all I know really about Ireland is this, that they have this kind of loophole and bullshit. At the same time, I get the point, right? Like the tax haven places, usually it's not that no one is working, right? You know, they're often like vacancy island in some way, so there's, you know, staff for that. But for the most part, it's not like a real country. It's really like a tax evasion country, right? So I get the point. You know, Ireland is a tax evasion country that's actually a country on its own, you know, rolling the wheels. I get the point. Okay, again, like in some way, you know, as fucked up as this is, if, you know, any of this bullshit is helping the Irish people themselves, you know, get more work, get more money, you know, in the grand scheme of the world and all the countries as a whole, it's kind of fucked up. But at the same time, you know, I guess if it helps some people, it helps some people, right? You know, but again, like it's one of the things where I always get mad about tax stuff. Like, you know, again, especially when it's like rich people or, you know, rich companies that just try to get away from, you know, sometimes paying like, you know, billions, but for them it's like nothing in reality. Really interesting video. Okay, I liked it a lot. I like this kind of video. If you guys have anything more like that about countries and, you know, specific interesting stuff about countries, I'm always willing to learn. I tend to check out more like some you know, some like history of countries, but like, you know, back in the days. I don't really know much stuff about like, you know, the state of modern countries, right? Even France, I mean, you know, like I don't really follow politics. I don't really follow much of the news of the law or anything, so I tend to be kind of kind of very lost, right? I mean, yeah. Anyway, really good one.